All right. Well, so let's talk about the ingestion of a configuration today and how that could be done efficiently and also in a way that we can track the changes and have an audit of what the configuration was. This is a episode 4 of our series. Now, you can watch the previous episodes. This is just a follow-up. The code that we're gonna use to demonstrate this in action is in GitHub, and there's all 3 episodes merged in that repo, so you can start from exactly the same code that we're gonna do today. If there would be somebody who has not seen any of the previous episodes, I'm Thomas Neubauer. I'm CTO and co-founder of Quix, and I have spent my whole career working with sensor data in all different formats. So let me switch to tablet into our whiteboard where we left in the previous episode, and let's talk about configuration because in pretty much every use case where you have sensor data, you also have some metadata about the devices that have these sensors. So whatever that is, a test rig that has probably a test running, which has some information about the test, what you're testing, who is testing it, what are the environment settings of the test, or if you're tracking some vehicle, you want to know that the the type of the vehicle, who is the owner, what is the engine inside, for example. If in F1 we want to know what is the setting of the car. All of these metadata you don't want to send together with sensor data all the time because that will be just very wasteful because of course they don't change that much as, let's say, a GPS coordinates of a vehicle or a temperature sensor in a test rig. But when you just send it when it's changed, it's actually quite complicated for downstream services because they have to be stateful. They have to handle the situations when you join the data after the configuration was published. So I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna go back to where we were last time and discuss this in more detail. So I'm gonna stop sharing my laptop and I'm gonna go here and okay,
Yeah,
cool. So you see my whiteboard now. Good.
yeah. Just minimize the video on there and we'll be good to go.
Yeah. All right. So if you remember, this is our architecture from the previous episodes where we had a couple of things. Well, first of all, we had the machine in a test rig room, some agent computer connected to that machine where we can run either something like a lab view or we're gonna run here a custom proprietary software listening to sensors on the machine and publishing data into MQTT, HTTP gateway. It depends on a customer. But basically, we have just discussed sense data at that point. But if I make this full screen, um, if we really get real here, what you're gonna see here is that people, the test engineers, will here have a either LabVIEW or custom apps running here and operating the machine settings and also configuring the experiment attributes of the test. And that would configure the machine, but also it would have a valuable information for downstream services to, uh, to make sense of the sense data. For example, you might want to, at the end here, if we go to the right, you want to maybe have data indexed by some properties of your configuration. Well, how are we gonna do that? How are we gonna join this one document information with thousands of messages going in a main route containing the temperature and humidity of the sensors in the machine? Because if we would go here to the right and we would just add, here a column, and on the side of temperature and humidity and some function, we would add, I don't know, for example, the location of the test. So let's imagine we would send Prague here. Well, either we can send Prague with every sensor value, that would be quite stupid, or we just send it once. But then what's going to happen if we join afterwards? We need to make sure that we keep the state and everything. So for that reason, we're going to use a configuration management. There's more reasons to it on top of this, because it will be quite difficult to kind of maintain, track, and compare these configurations if they are just sent to the data pipeline. Because at the end of the day, they are documents, they are not time series data. So they require a different interface for query, different interface to visualize, and to manipulate in general. So at this point, let's talk about the simplest configuration when we have this form or a script here that's gonna call an API and configure the machine. But now I'm gonna go back to my laptop. So remember, we had a webinar project. You can go to GitHub. This is the link. So we have episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3. Obviously, after this webinar, we're gonna merge the episode 4. But if you remember, we had MQTT source, data normalization, data transportation, etc. So if we go into the topics, just to remind ourselves what the data were there. We got this sort of structure. So we have 3D printer, print speed, nozzle temperature, bed temperature, fan speed, etc. Coming in from MQTT. And then we convert that into more of a tabular structure. So here we have fan speed, bed temperature, print temperature, the type of machine, etc. So now we have been saving the data raw like that, but we're gonna stop doing that. We now want to join our data with configuration and then save it to a data lake. So let's go to the configuration, the dynamic configuration project here. This is our project template. You can use it as well. And here we have an example how such a form in a test rig room can look like. So here we have, we're just going to choose the printer. And here we have the name of the experiment, the name of the machine, who is the engineer running the test, where is the location of experiment, what is the toner material. And then here we have some example of mapping of sensors. So we're going to convert the print speed to print velocity, for example. So here I'm going to put the experiment to Prague. I'm going to update the experiment and go to a different app that allows us to look at all of our documents. So here we can see that there's an experiment configuration for a 3D printer one. And this is the document that the form created. Now, the mapping of that form to this JSON, that's the custom thing for every use case, every project. It's going to be very different. But you can imagine how that could look. It could be XML, it could be something else, but then you have to convert it to the JSON to work in this system. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. So here you can see I had two different versions of the document. And what is very important is this valid from, because this is from what moment this version of the configuration is valid. So going back to our pipeline, to our webinar project, what I'm going to do now is that here in topics, I'm going to import a link to my configuration project. This is to listen not just for the sensor data, but also the configurations and their update. Cool. So although we're going to have the template for this, I'm going to start with the empty template just to walk you through the changes we're going to need. So here, I'm going to create a new service. And here, I'm going to call this a data enrichment. We're going to enrich the data with the configuration. Nice. So let's get rid of the comments. And let's just print for now what we have. Just so we understand it's working. Okay, amazing. So we have a 3D printer data coming in. Perfect. So now first thing we have to do is to add another topic called config updates. And there we are. And we're going to get the same thing. And I'm just going to copy paste the code so I don't have to type it here completely. So let me copy paste that code here. There we are. And I'm going to have to do some imports. There we are. So just so you understand, this is the enricher, which will listen to updates in configuration and under the hood, make sure that it's joining the data accordingly. So the sensor data getting the configuration from the right version of the right document in our configuration database. And on top of that, what we're going to do then is to actually define that enriching. So here, I'm just going to copy paste this. Let's, for now, go through what I have done here. So what I'm saying here is I want to join the telemetry data with the configuration. And I want to get from the configuration, that is experiment config, that's the type we have described. I want to use a property location, and I want to save it as a location column. So now if I do this and I run it again, if you remember here for printer 1, we have here a location. If you remember here, that's a location property here. So now, yeah, we have to update this to latest version. And also, because this is basically a stream join, we have to make sure that the key is interpreted as string and not a binary. Cool. So let's give it a try. So now I made typo. This is config topic. Oh, this is config topic. I made a mistake here. All right, so now you see this is happening and we have location Prague. So what are we gonna do now is we're gonna move the experiment in real time to London. And now you see it's already in London. And that's because we have introduced a new version with this configuration and all the join worked properly. So if we go back here, why we would do this? Why we would join these two topics? Well, at this point, we want to leverage that field. We maybe don't need to leverage, I don't know, the test engineer or machine ID or experiment name, but we just need to use the location because maybe we want to use it when we sync the data to the database. So we index data by location. So if you remember before, here we have, so I'm going to deploy this as a service just so we have it running. Good. And remember, we have here the S3 Quix sync. So what I'm going to do now instead is I'm going to put it at the end of the pipeline. I'm going to go here and change it to so we have to first decide some reasonable name for outputting the data here. The transform is a bit, so let's call this enriched. Now, when that is done, let's change this to enriched. And the table name could be called webinar data. And here, we're going to change this to location dash machine dash sense ID. Okay. So let's save this. And let's start this. So now we're going to have data indexed by the configuration. So let's wait for this to start. Yeah, we need to wait to get actually some data from the enrichment. I think we have forgot here to output the data. So that would actually not give us a match. So let's call this data enrichment V1. So we actually have some data to save. So after this gets deployed, we should get a green enriched topic. And as a result, this thing should start save data to the data lake. Just taking some time to start up. I have gave it very little CPU, so it's not the fastest service in the world. There we are. So now you see it's producing the data. That's amazing. And we can also see that this will every 30 seconds offload data to the database, as you can see here. Although we saw that we have left an index that is no longer there, so we have to remove the sensor ID, because remember from the previous episode there was a different topic. So let's deploy it again. So now we're gonna go and check the data lake and see what we have there. So webinar and the query UI. Amazing. So now we don't have any data yet, but we're gonna have there soon. So if we go back to our webinar here, and after 30 seconds passed, this will save the first data there. There we are. So we see that the first batch was appended. So now here we have a location London. So we can query that location. Amazing. Now, if we go and here and we change to Dresden, so we move this experiment to Dresden, we're gonna get a new folder in our data lake, and we're gonna be able to compare the test in London and Dresden like that. So this will eventually get the Dresden. There we are. Amazing. So this is the simplest way how you can handle the configuration when you are in control of how the configuration is produced. Sometimes, though, you have old systems in place which will not allow you to do it cleanly like this. Okay? At that point, what you basically have to do is very similar to what a data integration job looks like when you're connecting your sensor data from your test rig. It's as funny as that, but if we go back to our configuration project, I have here an example of how that can look like. So I'm just gonna stop it because it's not connected to real thing, but I just to show you how that could look like. So the configuration thing here is basically very similar post to configuration management as our form that I showed you here, which is just posting new configuration document. Except here, the source of that is a ugly XML toner configuration that has been dropped in S3 folder by an external existing system that we can't control. So the moment that the file drops into this folder, this source will pick it up. It will convert it from that XML to a JSON and then sync it to our JSON system. With that, what you get basically is, you know, versioning and auditing exactly like you see with the clean version of this, except you getting an existing configuration in place. So yeah, now you see I've enabled this pipeline and it's got a file and yeah, it processes it. So hopefully it makes sense. Please check out our GitHub if you want to try this by yourself. And everything I showed you, all the code is there, open source in GitHub. So you can go step by step following this video. And also, if you get stuck, just check the code and copy it to your project if you get stuck. Hopefully it was helpful. And yeah, if you have any question, just write me on the Slack or anybody in the Quix. We will get you, we will get somebody to help you.